My name is Ellie Vance, and I was standing in the bridal suite of our family's Newport estate, looking out at the perfectly manicured lawns rolling down to meet the Atlantic. It was 1 hour before my wedding, and the room buzzed with the low hum of anticipation. My dress, a cascade of ivory silk, felt like a second skin. Everything was perfect, too perfect. That's when Catherine, our wedding planner, entered the room, her face pale, her usual unflappable demeanor completely gone. She closed the door softly behind her. "Ellie," she began, her voice barely a whisper, "there's a problem." My heart began to hammer against my ribs. "What is it? Is it the flowers? The orchestra?" She shook her head, holding up a tablet with trembling hands. "It's everything. The final payments for the venue, the caterer, the staff, they've all been revoked." I stared at her, uncomprehending. Revoked? By who? My father already handled everything. Her eyes met mine, full of pity. The order came directly from the CEO of the Vance Trust. It cited a failure to comply with the family's morality clause. The words hit me like a physical blow. The Vance Trust. My father, he wasn't just disapproving of my marriage, he was detonating it. In that moment, the opulent room felt like a cage. The beautiful dress a costume for a play that had just been violently canceled. I had no idea this was only the first move in a war I never wanted to fight. If you've ever felt the ground crumble beneath your feet because of a choice you made for love, give this video a like so I know I'm not alone. The morality clause. It sounded so archaic, so puritanical. But in my family, it was just another tool of control. To understand why my father would do this, you have to understand Newport, or at least our Newport. My family, the Vances, didn't just summer here. We were part of the bedrock. Our name is carved into the stone of libraries and museums, a dynasty built on Gilded Age fortunes and ruthless 20th century business deals. My father, Harrison Vance, ran the Vance Trust like a kingdom. To him, everything was an asset or a liability, including his only daughter. My mother, Beatrice, was the queen consort, her life's work maintaining our family's impeccable social standing. Every party, every charity gala was a performance, and I was her most important prop. From the day I was born, my life was a blueprint. I was to attend a Seven Sisters college, marry a man whose last name carried equal weight, and produce the next generation of Vances. My passion for architectural preservation, my desire to save the beautiful old buildings my father's generation saw only as teardowns, was treated as a charming hobby. It was something to keep me busy before my real job, being a Vance wife, began. I was living in a beautiful gilded cage, suffocating under the weight of a legacy I never asked for. The ocean breeze that smelled like freedom to tourists always just smelled like salt and expectations to me. I'm curious where this story is reaching you tonight. Let me know in the comments what city or state you're watching from. It makes this whole thing feel a little less lonely. And then, into that perfectly curated, suffocating world, walked Liam O'Connell. He was a wildfire in a manicured garden. We didn't meet at a charity ball or a yacht club regatta. We met on opposite sides of a picket line. His nonprofit, Second Story, was fiercely protesting a plan by my father's company to demolish a historic block downtown to build another soulless, glass and steel luxury condo complex. I was there representing my family's firm, sent to do damage control. He was there with a megaphone, his voice raw with passion, speaking about community, history, and the people being displaced. He saw the buildings not as decaying assets, but as homes, as stories worth saving. He saw the world the way I did. He was everything my family wasn't. The son of a firefighter and a school nurse from South Boston, he'd built his organization from nothing, fueled by grit and an unwavering belief that everyone deserves a second chance. There was no pretense about him, no carefully constructed facade. Our first real conversation wasn't over champagne. It was over lukewarm coffee in a styrofoam cup after a heated town hall meeting. He didn't care that my last name was Vance. He challenged my opinions, made me laugh, and for the first time in my life, I felt someone was listening to the person I was, not the heiress I was supposed to be. Falling in love with Liam wasn't just a choice of the heart. It was a quiet declaration of war against the empire my father had built. I just didn't realize how loud the cannons would be. When I told my parents I was engaged to Liam, they didn't yell. It was worse. They were silent. A cold, surgical silence that I knew meant they were strategizing. The other shoe dropped a week later during a family dinner in the grand cathedral-like dining room of our home. It wasn't a celebration. It was a boardroom meeting. My father, Harrison, sat at the head of the table, not looking at me, but at a portfolio in front of him. "Your relationship with Mr. O'Connell," he began, the words tasting like poison in his mouth, "has created a significant complication." He then laid it all out with the emotionless precision of a surgeon. For the past year, he had been negotiating a merger with Sterling Industries, our largest competitor. A merger that would create a real estate titan worth billions. The final piece of the deal, the good faith gesture to seal the alliance, was a union between the two families, my marriage to their son, Carter Sterling III. Carter was exactly the man they'd always wanted for me. A vapid, polo-playing clone with an MBA from Wharton and the moral compass of a shark. My mother then chimed in, her voice dripping with manufactured concern. "Darling, this isn't just a business deal. It's about securing our family's legacy for the next 100 years. It's your duty." They weren't asking me. They were informing me of my role. I wasn't their daughter. I was the closing clause in a contract. It's crazy how people think they have the right to map out your life. Let me know in the comments what you would have done. Type 1, if you would have walked out right then, or Type 2, if you would have stayed to fight. I looked my father dead in the eye and told him I would rather be disowned than be a pawn in his corporate game. I thought my defiance would shock them into silence, that they would finally see I was no longer a child they could command. I was so naive. The open hostility stopped, but it was replaced by something far more sinister, a quiet, creeping campaign of psychological warfare. Whispered conversations would cease the moment I walked into a room. My mother would look at me with a pained, pitying expression, as if I were a terminally ill patient refusing treatment. The real attack came a week later. My father summoned me to his study, the one with the dark mahogany walls and the scent of old leather and power. "Eleanor," he said, his voice deceptively calm, "I know you think we're being unreasonable, but we are your parents. Our only duty is to protect you. And we can't protect you from a man you don't truly know." He then slid a sleek gray folder across the polished surface of his desk. The label, in crisp block letters, read, "Liam O'Connell, Due diligence. My blood ran cold. Inside wasn't just an invasion of privacy. It was a work of fiction. There were fabricated betting slips from offshore gambling sites showing thousands of dollars in debt. There were bank statements, cleverly altered to look like he was living far beyond his means. And the crown jewel of their deception, a forged copy of a sealed juvenile police report for assault, a ghost from a past that never existed. It was a perfectly crafted lie, designed to look like a terrible truth. I laughed. It wasn't a sound of humor. It was a dry, brittle sound of utter disbelief. I pushed the folder back across the desk so hard it slid off the other side and hit the floor with a soft thud. This is pathetic, Dad. Even for you. You couldn't find any real dirt, so you just made it up? My father's face hardened into a granite mask, but before he could speak, the study door opened. My mother entered, dabbing a silk handkerchief at her dry eyes in a piece of theater so perfect it could have won an award. And right behind her, dressed in a custom-tailored suit, was Carter Sterling III. My stomach turned. This wasn't a discussion. It was an ambush, an intervention staged by monsters. "Darling," my mother cooed, rushing to my side. "We know this is a shock. We had to show you the kind of man you've gotten involved with." Carter stepped forward then, placing a condescending hand on my shoulder. "Ellie," he said, his voice smooth as oil. "We can put all this behind us. This little mistake. Tell everyone you came to your senses. My family will understand. We can still have the wedding we were meant to." They stood there, a united front of corruption. My father, the ruthless puppeteer. My mother, the master of emotional manipulation. And Carter, the soulless opportunist, ready to pick up the prize. They weren't offering me a choice. They were showing me my cage and asking me to walk back into it willingly. I looked at the three of them, the architects of my misery, and felt a cold, liberating clarity. I was done. I walked out of that study and didn't look back. For a few hours, I felt a surge of adrenaline, of pure, righteous fury. I was free, but I had severely underestimated the scorched earth tactics of Harrison Vance. He didn't just want to win, he wanted to annihilate. The first strike was the one I told you about at the beginning, the public, humiliating cancellation of our wedding just an hour before I was supposed to walk down the aisle. The morality clause was their weapon of choice, a vague and powerful tool to cast me as the unstable one, the one who had failed to uphold the family honor. But that was just the opening salvo. The next day, the true assault began. Liam got a call from the chairman of his non-profits board. An anonymous source had sent them the entire fabricated file, along with a letter expressing deep concern over Liam's character. Simultaneously, a sleazy local gossip blog published an article titled, "Newport Heiress's Fiancé, a Troubled Past." It was all there. The phantom gambling debts, the invented criminal record. They were trying to destroy his reputation, to poison the very community he had dedicated his life to serving. Then came the call for me. The Historical Society, my one sanctuary, regretfully informed me they had to suspend my board position. My father had threatened to pull a 7-figure donation if they kept me. They weren't just stopping our wedding, they were systematically erasing us from the lives we had built. We were completely surrounded, with nowhere to turn. It's a horrible feeling, being attacked from all sides. I wonder what time it is where you are right now as you're hearing this. Just look at the clock and drop the time in the comments if you've ever felt like the world was closing in on you all at once. We were in Liam's small apartment overlooking the harbor, a world away from my family's stone mansions. The air was thick with defeat. My phone was a constant barrage of pitying texts and reporters' inquiries. Liam was on his laptop, desperately trying to do damage control with his board. We were adrift in a storm my parents had engineered, and frankly, we were sinking. I was staring out the window, watching the fog roll in, feeling like it was seeping into my very bones, when the doorbell rang. The sharp, sudden sound made us both jump. We weren't expecting anyone. My first thought was that it was a process server or a reporter who had found our hiding place. Liam opened the door, and my breath caught in my throat. Standing in the hallway, looking completely unfazed by the modest surroundings, was my maternal grandmother, Genevieve DeWitt. She was 82 years old, dressed in a perfectly tailored Chanel suit, her silver hair coiled in an elegant chignon. Genevieve lived in a penthouse on Park Avenue and was a legend in New York society, a woman who could end careers with a single, quiet phone call. She was the family's true matriarch, the source of the original fortune, but she had remained above the fray of our family's drama for decades. Her presence here on this doorstep was as shocking as seeing a lion calmly walk into a library. She looked past Liam, her sharp blue eyes finding mine. "Eleanor," she said, her voice as smooth and cool as a marble. "It appears your parents have forgotten who taught them how to play chess. May I come in?" My grandmother sat on Liam's worn-out sofa, a picture of regal composure in the midst of our wreckage. She listened, without interruption, as I recounted the entire sordid tale, the business deal, the fabricated file, the canceled wedding, the smear campaign. Her expression never changed, but I could see a glacial fury gathering in her eyes. When I finished, she simply nodded once, as if I had just confirmed something she already suspected. Then, she opened her crocodile leather handbag and retrieved her phone. The next 10 minutes were the most astonishing display of power I have ever witnessed. First, she called our family's top lawyer. "Jonathan, this is Genevieve," she said, her tone leaving no room for argument. "You will be freezing Harrison and Beatrice's access to all operational accounts and personal credit lines, effective immediately. I am invoking my emergency clause as the majority trustee. Don't call him. Call me when it's done." Click. Next, she dialed the chairman of the Historical Society. "David, it's Genevieve DeWitt. My granddaughter will be reinstated to her board position with a full apology by morning. My annual endowment, which I am now doubling, depends on your discretion." Click. Finally, a text to her personal legal team in New York. "There is a blogger in Newport. Find him. We are suing for defamation. Spare no expense. Make an example of him." She put her phone away, the silence in the room now filled with a palpable sense of shifting power. She had dismantled my father's entire attack in less time than it takes to boil water. There's nothing quite like the feeling of seeing a bully finally meet their match. If you agree, just write the word justice in the comments. I want to see how many of us are out there. 2 days later, I was standing in that same spot, on that same immaculate lawn overlooking the Atlantic. But this time, everything was different. The air wasn't filled with dread, but with a defiant joy. Thanks to my grandmother, the wedding was back on. The guests were a smaller, more intimate group. Our true friends, Liam's wonderful family, and a few of my relatives who had quietly called to offer their support after hearing what had happened. Genevieve, looking radiant, was sitting in the front row, right where my mother should have been. As Liam and I stood before the officiant, ready to say our vows, I felt a profound sense of peace. We had weathered the storm, and that's when they appeared, walking down the aisle as if they owned it. My parents, Harrison and Beatrice. They were dressed for a funeral, not a wedding, their faces contorted with rage and humiliation. A hush fell over the ceremony. The music sputtered and died. My father stopped just feet from us, his voice shaking with fury as it boomed across the lawn. "This wedding will not proceed. It is a mockery. You, Eleanor, have brought shame upon this family, and I will not stand by and watch you throw your life away on this nobody." My mother stood beside him, a silent, venomous statue. For a heartbeat, the old fear flickered inside me. But then I looked at Liam and at my grandmother, and I felt a strength I never knew I possessed. I calmly took the microphone from the stunned officiant. "Thank you, Father," I said, my voice clear and amplified for all to hear. "Thank you for making your position so unmistakably clear. Security, would you please escort these two guests who are clearly not here to celebrate love off the premises?" As security escorted my stunned parents away, a moment of silence hung in the air, followed by a wave of supportive, heartfelt applause from our guests. In that moment, the last chains of my old life fell away. We turned back to the officiant, our hands locked together, and when we spoke our vows, every word echoed with the weight of the battles we had fought to get there. Our reception wasn't the sterile, high society affair my parents had envisioned. It was a loud, joyful, and beautifully real celebration. Liam's firefighter cousins taught my college friends Irish step dancing on the grass, and my grandmother held court, sharing stories and laughing more freely than I had seen in years. It was the birth of a new family, one forged in loyalty and love, not in bloodlines and bank accounts. In the months that followed, there was no dramatic reconciliation. There were no tearful apologies. There was only a profound and necessary silence. I had cut the cord. With my grandmother's guidance, I assumed full control of my trust, but I had no interest in a life of idle luxury. Liam and I made a decision. We pooled our resources and a significant portion of my inheritance to create the DeWitt Vance Foundation. Our mission was simple: to use the capital my family had amassed to heal the kind of communities their businesses had often harmed. We fund historic preservation projects in low-income neighborhoods and provide grants for non-profits just like the one Liam started. We are, in a very real sense, using the old money to build a new legacy. My life is no longer about marble halls and hushed conversations. It's about brick dust, community meetings, and the joy of building something real with the man I love. Looking back, the person who stood in that bridal suite a year ago feels like a stranger to me now. She was a girl who was terrified of making waves, who thought that love had to be negotiated with duty. The crisis my parents created, the war they waged, was the most painful experience of my life, but it was also the most liberating. It burned down the cage and forced me to learn to fly. And through it all, I learned a few fundamental truths that I wanted to share with you as I close this story. First, that family isn't always the one you are born into. It is the one you build. It's the people who show up when the world turns its back, who love you for who you are, not for what you represent. Second, true independence isn't about money. It's about the courage to define your own values and live by them, even when it's the harder path. And finally, legacy isn't something you inherit. It's something you create every day through your actions, your kindness, and your character. I know my story is intense, but I believe we all face our own versions of this battle. I would be so honored if you shared a piece of your own story in the comments, a time you had to stand up for what you believed in. If this story resonated with you, please let me know by hitting that like button. And if you believe in the power of forging your own path, subscribe to the channel, and let's build a community of brave people together. Remember, sometimes the most brutal storms water the strongest trees.